Supermoon Tarot, and I'm so excited to get into today's topic, which was initially about plants. And then my spirit guide stepped in and was like, could you please first talk about crystals? And I was like, yeah, of course. So we're going to be getting into what are they, their purpose, how do they function, how can you work with them, how can you communicate with them, and so much more. As per usual, I get all my information by going to the Akashic Records, which is essentially a place of infinite knowledge open to all, and I also simultaneously work with my spirit guide. Now, it's important to know that when I get information, and something that you should consider when you're getting information, whether it be from the Akashic Records or you're having sort of like a psychic spiritual experience, to confirm it, to double check, to triple and quadruple check, because it's important to not only be a self-aware individual, but we're looking for the truth, and we want to be aware of if we're potentially projecting a sort of like a subconscious part of ourselves. So we always want to make sure, like, hey, is this accurate? Am I hearing this? Do I have any blockages that are creating some sort of other narrative or anything like that? So that's just something to be aware of. But I wanted to share something cool that's been popping up in my own personal journey as of late. So the last couple of months, whenever I go to the Akashic Records, I start to tap into what I can only describe as cosmic knowledge. Knowing things on a very deep level without ever hearing it before, explanation. And while I'm looking through all of the materials, what looks like books basically in the Akashic Records, as well as communicating with my spirit guide and such, sometimes I will just speak to my spirit guide and like tell them the information, and then I'm just like, where did that come from? And of course I always double, triple, quadruple check with them, like, hey, is that accurate what I'm saying? And it is. And I can even see in the archives that is accurate, and I can even check there as well. But it's becoming more and more of a common thing, and I'm more and more tapping into that, which I didn't really know that was going to happen. So I just thought I'd share it, because potentially that might put in a positive way, get your brain to, tapping into that cosmic knowledge, because sometimes when we share with one another, hey, did you experience this? Did you experience this? Just knowing that option is available essentially opens up a subconscious door for everyone else. So yeah, cosmic knowledge, I've been tapping into that a lot lately. So let's get into all this crystal business. Crystals are sentient beings that have chosen to reincarnate as pure frequency. Their main purpose is to find and then express the perfect frequency matched with their purpose. So yeah, they are living beings, essentially, like plants are. They are defined as plant souls, but if you are familiar with my Patreon or this conversation, plant souls are their own thing, but you can potentially have been a plant and reincarnate as a person, but you could have also reincarnated as a tree. And in this case, you could have potentially been a crystal, and your crystals that you're hanging out with now, there's a very good chance they at one point in time were a human, a tree, something else at some point in time. And that they come into this world with a frequency in mind. They have a frequency that they are sort of like connecting to and drawing to. They're both like, it's coming out of them, they're looking for it, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. So let's get into this. Whenever I say me or like then I ask, this is sort of like a communication thing, going back and forth, looking through the research and talking to my spirit guide, kind of all going into one. So me, I'm asking, does this mean that they aren't born or created as they're meant to be frequency, i.e. like a sunstone? I'm pretty sure is associated with like a happy disposition, if I remember the top of my head. I'm pretty sure I'm correct about that. As in, when a crystal comes into the world, I just kind of assumed, like, here's a sunstone. It's all about happiness and frequency. It's already there. It already knows what it is. It's emanating that happy disposition kind of concept. And I was told no. At first, they are born in the earth as a faceless, shapeless, purposeless being with one intent: to find their matching and intended frequency. So it's like they know there's some sort of goal, they're connected to it, that's their main thought process, but they don't know the exact meaning of that frequency until they explore it more. Then over time, they understand what that frequency is and then begin to take on characteristics of said frequency in order to locate and attract this frequency. As in, the way they look is a result of them sort of trying to draw in closer that matching sort of frequency. So they both are existing as that frequency, putting it out into the world, being like, hey, where's my matching frequency? Then when they start to understand over time like what that exactly means, they sort of put on a uniform, if you will, which is why they look the way they look, in order to draw that frequency, the meaning of that frequency, closer to them. But it's a bit of a self-discovery process. So then I asked, so they don't know what it is, like what that frequency is, until they question what is or isn't a matching component. And as in, there's a bit of a trial and error process kind of going on here. It's not unlike when you were just a person and you grow up and live life and you say, do I like this thing? Do I not like this thing? I've experienced this thing. How do I feel this matches to my goals or identity or who I am? It's very much that thought process they're going through with their environment. And I was told yes. I said, do they solely do this based on a surrounding environment? As in, the closest surrounding environment. So that little crystals deep in the earth, maybe like, I don't know, a 3-foot radius around them, where they're just kind of feeling out the dirt and comparing each individual speck to see how it matches their frequency. And I was told no. Crystals can extend themselves past what humans see as limitations and obstacles. As in, if we were to do that same concept, so, you're sitting in whatever room you're sitting in, that process only kind of goes out, or your mindset's only judging the world around you and assessing it and comparing it to your likes and dislikes, like we just talked about, within like a 10-foot radius. So for crystals, what we see as a wall and going, well, like, I can't see in the next room, or I can't see, 2 towns over, that's not a limitation to them. That's not a scope for them, because they're doing this all non-physically, like psychically with their essence, so to speak, their being, if I can put it that way. Keep in mind, we can do this too, but this is a common thing I always hear in the Akashic Records or from my spirit guide, is just this deep conditioning that we think there's a limitation. We think that's all that we can do. So going on, I asked, like, set perimeters as far as we can reach, see, and touch, like I just explained. Exactly. Crystals work purely on extension through non-physical intention. Their form is only a reflection of ideas and matching characteristics of said frequency, not their ability to work based on their physical reach. Then I asked, so each crystal's appearance is a picture and a clear representation depicting that frequency, like a model? And I was told, correct. This is one of their purposes and why they function as they do. And I said, to be both a clear picture and description of these frequencies and to hold them? And I was told, correct. So that means they come into this world and they're like, got a frequency, and they can't quite identify it yet, so they're sort of reaching out really far with their essence, if you will, sort of psychically touching the world, trial and erroring and comparing what seems to match that frequency. And then as they better understand, even if it's a lot of no's, like that's not it, no, that's not it, even that's helping them over time be like, but I'm getting a deeper sense, an idea of what this frequency is, and in turn understanding how I feel about it, like them, the crystal, and the more how they can best describe it, and this in turn enables them to make decisions based on how they want to come into existence as a crystal. That's when they start to take their color, their shape, their pattern, and that this way they physically look is a matching component of that frequency. So that means when you're holding a crystal, that crystal is a snapshot of a frequency. And that blew my mind, because when you think about frequencies, they're often described on like a line chart, just kind of sort of a measurement. There isn't a lot of scenarios where, and even frequencies get so specific because everything has a frequency. So it's more than just saying something is an emotion is a frequency. There are frequencies when you are performing an action, and that frequency might be totally different if you're performing the same action but on a different day, at a different time, in a different mindset. You see what I'm saying here? So you're getting a literal Polaroid of, well, not, you're going to hear this a million times in this video, a frequency, which I think is very cool. I then asked, do crystals hold and emanate a frequency/energy? And I was told, no, they hold. People can hop onto that held frequency and feel the result of it. As in, while there is a natural sort of radiant quality to them, once they are in tune and they're like, okay, this is my frequency, this is what I'm all about, you know, they've got their coloring, their shape, they do not push it out. You know how we can focus and send our frequencies and energies in a particular direction or towards something? They just keep it inwards and embody it and hold that frequency. And that's something important to note when you're working with them. They are not pushing it towards you. They are the rock, if you will. And you are just kind of hopping on, as it was described, to it. So you're the one becoming attuned to them. They are not pushing it into you and having it leak onto you. So if you start to feel an effect from a crystal when you're enjoying it, it means you're hopping onto that frequency very fast. You know how to, and then that's when you're both embodying and taking in the amplification of it. Then I continue to ask, do they enact any other action-based functions? And I was told no, not for the benefit of others. They live for themselves and the betterment of the system. I said, the system as a whole, as in Earth, the cosmos, the spiritual realm, like the functionality of everything. And then I got cut off and I was told all of it, yes. Then I asked, if they crystals hold a frequency, does that in turn mean energy too? I was told, yes, all life forms have energy. Now, I was doing a little more digging when it came to the topic of certain kinds of crystals being associated or linked to particular ideas, moods, theme, a certain kind of assistance. Now, when you're getting your information from the spirit realm, you'll be told something verbally at the same time you're visually seeing it, but you're also getting a vibrative quality. Now, keep in mind, this is going on also in the physical world, but we notice it a lot easier when we travel actively to the spirit realm, to the non-physical. So in that vibrative part of the communication, you're getting 10 other things shown and told to you at the same time as the other stuff, which is why it's possible when somebody gets an instant download in just a couple seconds or minutes, so much information is communicated to them at once. And also the vibrative quality can communicate a lot of things that there isn't always words in order to describe. And so when I was being shown what crystals relate to frequency-wise, it was incredibly nuanced from crystal to crystal. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it wasn't as simple as a crystal is just related to the emotion of happiness. It felt so much more detailed and indescribable. And so this is what I wanted to understand and know, if what we perceive as, hey, if I get a rose quartz, is that same property that it is supposed to hold frequency-wise, which is often with self-love, is that the same for all rose quartz? So I asked, people say certain crystals accomplish certain things and have certain benefits, emanate certain energy, or rather hold. Is that true? does rose quartz truly, as a collective, all connect to the idea of self-love? And I was told, crystals are much more complex than that. Not a single crystal holds the same frequency as another, as neither human shares the same as their peer. Yes, a rose quartz can hold a resemblance, and it was kind of like a sprinkle of self-love, but only a similarity. Each rose quartz has their own agenda, because remember, they are sentient. They are coming into this world with like, this is my frequency, this is what I'm vibing with. So agenda is a good word for it. And I said, i.e. more specific, nuanced forms of self-love, because if each one's different, are they all holding self-love? And then is the part where it's more detailed, the different kinds of ways you can experience it or embody it? And I was told no. They might hold some components with self-love, but also be looking for the meaning of a particular plant, or trying to balance out the energy of a certain point of the earth. I then asked, do crystals as a collective hold truth with any of the internet's matching ideas? As in, somebody comes up to you and says, hey, lapis this means this. But who got that information? And how do we know if that's true? We're told it, but who channeled that? How do we know that is what it is? And I was told some crystals, as in like some crystals are accurately matched to certain themes and ideas. Many are diagnosed incorrectly because people cannot always hear or see their own flaws and curb the meaning into what fits them, not the truth. I'm telling you, this pops up time and time again because sometimes people are unaware and it doesn't even mean you're going through something, you just might not know you have this really subtle type of blockage in maybe a particular way. It's not as simple as something like you don't trust or you're afraid of rejection. It could be something a little more like maybe you have an aversion to receiving knowledge through auditorial things, but you're totally okay seeing it visual, and you're not aware that you're like blocking things off. Do you know what I'm saying? So because you're unaware of that, there's a bit of the projection, and then you pick something. Again, this is happening on such a sub level. This is why we quadruple check things to make sure if that's the case. But unfortunately, this is where people were like, this means this, when really they were going through something and they are basically projecting onto that crystal's meaning. I then asked, are most crystals focused on earth-based matters, or do their agendas vary? Because my spirit guide was talking about a lot of earth-based concepts. I was told most work with, for, or against, which in turn is still for the earth, working with the earth. They are plant souls and have more focused individual energy than a tree. As in, trees, by the way, I'm going to talk about this all in the plant video. You can get a lot of great advice from plants, and that includes trees. I've had some great combos with trees. They have got great wisdom. But trees tend to function more like, kind of like a hive mind. Not all plants, but like, you'll find certain collections of certain types of plants have that mentality. So while they might have their own individual thing to say, and they do speak individually, there's a way that they function and think and work as a whole, compared to each crystal is like, I got my own thing, I'm doing my own thing, I have my own goals, and they're much more set and individualized. This then led me into a million questions when it came to their souls, because somebody was asking on my Patreon, and I did actually find out the answer to this and answered it there, about do individual blades of grass have their own souls? Because think about how crystals work. They are often these huge chunks of rock, and then they're pulled apart, and you're getting a tiny slab of that. Yes, you can get little kind of sort of round tumbled rocks by the river. There's many ways you can receive it, but how does that exactly work? So I said, how does the whole crystal soul thing work? Remember when you are hanging out and talking and getting information from these all-knowing high vibrational beings, or hanging out in the Akashic records or anything like that, you don't have to be so formal. So the response was, each soul is designated to a chunk of crystal. Some souls are born individually, like a tumbled rock by the river, like we talked about. Some are in parts of masses of the same crystal, and some, after being split off from one another, are still one collective soul. This then means if there is a giant chunk of crystal, there is the potential that there could be 3, 6, however many souls in this one slab of crystal. And as it's chipped down and pulled apart, the souls will essentially move around to then leave and be with that chunk of crystal. So if this one slab gets split into 6 parts, they will squeeze and move where they need to go in order to then travel with said chunk of crystal, rather than existing as one collective body. But they're still, they're individual. However, whether it be one individual soul, or if we break down that crystal even more, there is the potential you can break apart. So let's say there's that, we've broken down that chunk of the crystal, there's only one soul in this chunk, and we've now broken it up into 4 different parts. Well, that soul does not split apart like soul fragments, doesn't become multiple souls. It's still one soul. It's just that it can exist amongst 4 different bodies. So it's kind of makes you think of like a weird friendship bracelet. If you had one part of that chunk of crystal and, you know, your friend did too, you still technically only have one soul, even though it's been split apart. So then I asked, can one soul be split off into many souls? Because I always double check this and I keep being told the same thing over and over again. They cannot. These individual separated parts are an advantage for them to work over many areas of the earth as one being. So this is when we talk about like sort of, you know, your purpose, or like how you want to go about achieving your purpose. There's a very good chance they, in their karmic contract, were like, okay, I want to do this work on earth, but in order to do this work on earth, I need to be around different parts of the earth. So I'm going to set it up so that I get split up into 4 different chunks, and this is going to make it easier for me to accomplish my goals. So this is not necessarily like a sad thing. It's just the way they function and the way they go about doing things, and it all working to their advantage, which I really love. And then I said, and if they are many souls in one chunk of crystal, and this is again what we just talked about, I was told, as they are broken off from the main crystal, they will separate their being into those parts. And if more parts are broken into smaller parts, then there are the amount of souls, then they operate like the crystal previously described. The idea where if we break it down more, then it's just one soul split amongst 5 different chunks, so to speak. And then asked, are crystals bothered by working with us? And the only reason I asked that is because they, from what I was shown vibratively, they are just kind of doing their own thing. They are rocking out. I mean, but did not mean to. They're just doing their own thing, and they are focused on their own, agendas, and it almost feels like, sorry, did I pull you away from what you were doing? Is that okay? We're hanging out. Is that okay to work with me? Because lots of people work with crystals. And then I was told, not at all. It is never a coincidence when an individual picks a crystal. And this is when we get a subtext to another question I'm sure you're asking. You can never pick the wrong crystal. Even if you choose the wrong crystal, you are in turn growing and learning from it in a way you might not have anticipated, but are still progressing nonetheless in the way you need it, which I love that. I love the universe. So if you've ever sort of gotten nervous or concerned, if you're truly tapped into your intuition and you're making the right choices and stuff like that, you're going to do great. You will pick it for the right reason, whatever that reason may be. Now keep in mind, I've had full-on crystals, this purple one right here, this amethyst, this big one right here, full-on be like, you take me home. And I was like, okay, I will. So there is the potential of being sought out in that kind of way, but sometimes you just pick something because it's pretty, or you're like, I don't know why, this is the one for me. Often when I go crystal shopping, I ask my spirit guides, hey, can you tell me which ones want to work with me? And I'll, pick it based on that. So that's another option in case you're interested. This then led me to ask, how does working with them work? And I was told, the crystal holds their frequency and their purpose perfectly. The crystal is the constant. The human is the ever-changing current, meant to attune, pull back and question, mirror, sync up, reject, to ebb and flow with these ideas. And that's the thing. That frequency we keep talking about for each individual crystal is so much more complex than one concept. It can work with many different situations, but still talking about one idea, but still be broken down into something that can be expressed over many novels. So it makes sense why, if you're drawn to a particular crystal, let's say because you feel nervous, each time you use it, you're nervous for a different reason, at a different time of day, for a different amount of time. So it makes sense that it is not just simply one idea that you're matching with. And that's how you're working with them, essentially. The crystal is holding a frequency, and how you're reacting to it, how you're thinking about it, matching with it, not vibing with it, mirroring it, letting it sort of pull you in and matching with it, all of this ebbing and flowing we just described is you working with that frequency. The crystal stays continuous and has its own agenda, but it does not mind sharing this and working with you in this kind of way. But that is the system at play here when people get into like, how am I working with the crystal? How does it work? You can hop onto it. You can practice matching it in order to use it to your advantage at another point in time when you don't have the crystal. Even the act of being like, I don't like these vibes, is you distinguishing something about how you interact with the world on a very subconscious and honestly psychic level. So keep that in mind when you go to work with your crystals. That's the relationship going on. And when we talked about the frequency being very complex, I then asked, so these frequencies are many ideas? And I was told, correct. They are much more complex than people will understand in this lifetime. When I was doing all this research, I was keeping in mind people who use crystals as a form of protection, or create crystal grids in order to carry out some form of task, or use crystals as a mood elevator or to affect their mood in general. And so I asked, what about when people use crystals to protect them or cheer them up? I was told the individual is working with the crystal. The crystal is not working for the individual. And then I said, is the individual actually protecting themselves, cheering themselves up? And is the crystal just helping and educating them through this ebb and flow reaction we have with crystals? The crystal reacts to the environment to create their own wishes. They teach people to do the same. The crystal does not mind sharing this information, but they do not perform wishes and tasks. Now, this does not mean you're not actually receiving protection. You're not actually carrying out a task on your crystal grid and, having your mood affected by crystals. It's just that we can now view it in a different way and take a moment to be aware of our own power. The crystals just vibing and being like, yeah, you want to hang out? That's fine. And I mean, they're not emotionless like that, but it's that vibe, if you will. And you're the one radiating, emanating, ebbing and flow in tandem with this frequency. You are much more a part of this process than you're maybe potentially were aware of before. So it's not just simply you buy a crystal and then it does all this work for you. It's teaching you something. It's helping you tap into your own potential. It is magnifying what is already inside you. So it's a fantastic tool, but it's it's interesting to look at it from this perspective. So, can you speak to the soul of this crystal? Which I already know the answer, but I asked anyways. And I was told, of course. You can perform this through many methods. Talking to them directly. If you can hear us, as in spirit guides, you can hear them. They can also meet them, the crystal, in the spirit realm, where many individuals can hear and see and understand better than they can past the preconceived limitations of the physical world. They can also allow themselves to meditate and empty their mind with the sole intention of letting the crystal send their energies and purpose into their being. So keep in mind, this is a huge reason I always talk about my courses. I created both the tarot training course and the intuition training course, which talks about going to the spirit realm and breaking down all of this type of stuff, because it is sort of my multi-purposed, like, it's a tool that you notice can be very useful time and time again. So when you pop up to the spirit realm, you can basically set the intention of, like, I'd like to talk to the soul of this crystal. I'd like to talk to this crystal, please. And they can show up and you can get to know them. You can get to know their frequency. If they'd like to work with you on particular projects or moods, or, you might have this one crystal you're really drawn to and they're like, yeah, I'm fine working with you, but did you know that crystal over there actually wants to work with you more right now on this particular situation and would be like a better fit in this particular case, which I love and is really beautiful. I also talk about on my Patreon in detail about understanding, like, the difference between your inner monologue compared to when you're communicating with high vibrational beings, and that includes crystals and stuff like that, and how to break that down and everything like that. But also, if you just want to simply meditate, and you meditate, you go in with the purpose of clearing your mind. Now, don't be hard on yourself or judge yourself if you have some thoughts popping to the surface, but you are trying to just kind of clear out that head as much as possible. And you're setting that intention. When we talk about setting intention, that means actively saying it out loud, really just to yourself, being like, this is the thing I'm going to do. And right before you go to close your eyes, maybe you put the crystal next to you and you go, hey, crystal, why don't you communicate with me? And they might talk to you, or you could tell them, could you put your frequency inside of me? And we will kind of vibe. And we talked about how you can pick up vibrations, and just by experiencing them, all the stuff that you're not quite sure how you know it or how to explain it, but when you're experiencing it in that way, it makes perfect sense, because it's a different way of experiencing knowledge, essentially. So that might be a great way of the frequency running through you with that purpose, and then understanding, like, oh, I know I'm learning so much, or I know how to work with this at what time, and so on and so forth. But hearing the idea of meditation, something going through you, I said, so people, like you guys, can channel them too. And I was told correct. And if you're familiar with my previous Spiritual Talks video, I talk all about channeling, what it is, how to do it. I am absolutely thrilled to see that a lot of you guys started channeling immediately. I'm like, like everything I can hope and dream for. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you guys. I just want to take a moment right now. This is like a totally off topic. I love hearing about the progression you guys are making in your own experience. And I saw on my last tarot video one of like the nicest, like, you guys are always so nice. It like gets me all like teared up. But you guys wrote the nicest communication back and forth about, it was just like a really flattering way of saying that you like how I give the information, that you're learning from it, that you feel my good vibes, and, I'm trying to send them out to you. And so that, I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much. I read them. It means a lot to me. I know I mostly focus on knowledge and stuff, but when the camera's off, that just like gets me through the day, makes me feel so happy. So thank you so much for that. So let me see where my notes were. Now, with all this level of communication and thoughts and purpose and goals, well, it makes you think about relationships. So I asked, do crystals have soulmates? And again, I already know this answer. And I was told yes. Friends, family, loved ones, they are no different from humans to animals to plants, to other beings. Now, how do I know this? So this is a little story within a story. So essentially, I was one time crystal shopping, and I was trying to choose between a couple amethysts, and this one was like, you better buy me, better leave with me. And I was like, it's just like, okay. And so it went from being like, I know crystals are like alive, to being like, oh, okay, they're really alive. And then not that long later, I was given this as a present. This beautiful, I always forget if it's an onyx or an obsidian. This beautiful baby. And this is so touching. These two are actually soulmates. That essentially they orchestrated through the cosmos for the two of them to meet up. So in a previous lifetime, they were together. They were like, we're gonna meet up again, and they're together now. So whenever I have them hanging out somewhere, I always make sure they're next to each other. But it gets even more wild. So one time I had somebody over, or it was not my personal guest, but this guest that was over had something really dark attached to them, like very high level dark. Like, it was pretty tough to get rid of it all. And when I was taking care of these, at the time I wasn't quite, I didn't quite fully understand the crystal process, so I thought I had to clear them or whatever. So I was putting them through a situation where they could be, cleaned out. And as I am clearing out this not great dark being and vibes, they essentially, I could see their spirit form, if you will, and they kind of looked like, I don't know how to explain this any other way, like rock people, and they were hugging each other, and they said that they didn't want to leave, and I was confused because I was clearing them out, and I was like, oh, why? And they were like, don't take us out yet, and I was like, really? It's been long enough. And they were like, no, don't take us out yet. And then when I realized that being was there, and I was like, oh, you're here, and took it out, they were like, this is why we didn't want to leave yet. We were waiting for you to notice. We were trying to let you know what's going on. And they were hugging each other, and that's when they told me they were soulmates. And so I was like, oh, I guess they can be in love. How beautiful. Branching off all of this crystal personality, I then asked, so they have opinions other than said frequency purposes? They're not just beings that are alive but emitting a frequency, they have other concepts and opinions about what's going on in the world around them. And my spirit guides goes, strong opinions. So again, continuing on with this idea of them being alive and working with them, I said, can crystals be asleep or need powering up? Because sometimes you'll get a crystal and it's just not as fully charged, or it's not been sort of given the right kind of love, and it just seems kind of not fully there, if you will. It kind of just doesn't feel as powerful and strong. And I was told, yes, this happens because they are either not in nature connected to their prime energy source, or they are with an individual who sees themselves as limited, which again is very enlightening to think about. Again, you are not sucking them up or taking anything away from them because you think that somehow you run out, or you are not this infinite being, or if you're particularly in a kind of mindset mood, you're sort of engulfing them, if you will. And so because they're not only not connected to their infinite prime life source, nature, and that energy is being put out there, it sort of can start to be quiet and fall asleep and need charging up again. And then I said, do humans suck up crystals' energy? And I was told no. Humans continuously underestimate their power and capabilities. The crystal can be engulfed by this limitation without a proper refill source. And then I asked, how can people refill or wake up or charge crystals? And I was told leaving them outside. And then I was getting more particular. Day or night? Is day or night important? Does it matter to the crystal? And I was told either is fine. Nature is nature. Time is a construct. Crystals do not see time, at least not the way linearly that we have created. And then I asked, what about if they fade? As in, when people don't want to leave them in the sun, depending on the type of crystal they are, or sometimes I think it's associated with salt baths and stuff like that. What if their sheen fades? Because if they emanate as an image or an idea, snapshot, if you will, of this frequency, are you then affecting their purpose and frequency if they fade? I was told fading is just the coloring, not ability or frequency. It still holds. So you're not affecting the frequency or ability. But then I continue to question. If the crystal is a model or picture of a frequency, is the discoloration from the sun or a salt bath take away or affect the proper image of the meaning? Not at all, is what I was told. This is a human facade they see based on deep conditioning. The crystals, are not faded underneath the facade. Now, this is something I can go into more detail in another video if you're interested. But essentially, in our everyday life we're living, whether we like it or not, we are deeply conditioned to certain ideas. A really popular one is when you sort of push against something, you feel it push back, so your brain goes, okay, it's real, it's there. And so when we are initially experiencing the spirit realm, when you interact or link hands or something with your spirit form self or your spirit guide or whatever, it's going to have a different sensation. That sensation will become stronger and will become more tangible feeling. But if our brain only understands that physical touching has this sort of pushback sensation, and then we don't feel that pushback sensation, we just assume it's just not happening, or what's happening, or I can't take this in. When we're living life, there is always another way to understand something. There is always another way to see something. There's always another way to experience it, take in information. You get the gist. And so we're essentially being deeply conditioned, and under the facade of what we think we see, the crystal's fine and doing great. Again, it goes back to that idea where we think we're limited. And so then the crystal sort of takes that on. It's like we think it can fade, but underneath it, it's doing just fine. So I love that. Then going back to the whole recharging it with nature and the other options, I said, you said nature recharges it. What else? Meditating and transferring your own energy into it, which I think is really cool. So you can just literally sit there and vibe with your crystal. And you don't even have to send your energy into the crystal. I mean, think about it. Think about how much you're vibing with the crystal and you're just next to the crystal. It's the same concept. You're mimicking the same concept. So you're going to sit there and you're just going to contemplate your inner self. And that can be a glowing image. I actually have a fun meditation that I did for connecting and expanding your inner being. You can just be quiet and you're just observing yourself. Something where you're giving yourself that kind of attention is a form of recharging, and then the crystal's going to vibe from it. You can send it in there, but essentially just being next to the crystal and your intention is, I'm going to vibe, and that vibe's going to go to the crystal. That's another way of recharging it, which is really fun. Also, two crystals with one human. I'm trying to turn it into a pun. You get to also meditate, which is literally the most amazing, powerful thing you can do in your life. It's so versatile. And then I asked what about drainage? Can you be drained from giving to the crystal? Just looking at all the possible options. I was told not a thing. Again, people can see themselves as drained or limited, but they are not. And crystals are not sucking up their energy. They are reconnecting with their own beliefs through you reconnecting with your own. So cool. I love that stuff. If you enjoyed this spiritual talk, I made a corresponding video over on my Patreon where my spirit guide showed me a technique that I'm showing to you guys where you can use your crystals to take sort of your temperature, if you will. Not your actual temperature, more of a checking in on a deep subconscious level and then using it to your advantage from there. I also posted 2 additional videos with that, a guided meditation for meeting the spirit of money and then gaining some form of info or knowledge from them from that meditation, and also a recent experience I had that comes into play where it talks about how you as a soul can exist at the same exact time frame as another reincarnation of yourself in the same year, decade, you know what I'm saying? And talking about disconnecting soulmate connections and what that exactly means and karmic connections. It's all over there. It's my spiritual Netflix, if you will, that I'm trying to build up with tons of information and knowledge where I answer questions and I go in deeper. I go to the Akashic Records to learn about ego and the spiritual geometry for deja vu. I go over guided meditations. I go over explanations. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, it's all over there for you. Either way, please give this video a like. It helps out the video so much. Go click that button. Hit that subscriber button and that notification button. I am wishing you the best. I look forward to see you the next one. Goodbye.